Have you ever wondered why, with all our advanced technology and methods, so many software projects still go off the rails? It's a huge question. And today, we're going to unpack it by exploring Scrum and the path to becoming a certified Scrum Master. We're going to see how a different way of thinking can help us navigate the chaotic, complex world of building great products. So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle what I call the complexity crisis. Then we'll get into the agile mindset that grew out of it and how the Scrum framework makes that whole mindset real. We'll introduce the Scrum Master, follow a team through their very first work cycle, and finally, see how it all comes together to deliver actual value. All right, let's start at the beginning. Why did we need a completely new way of working in the first place? Well, it all boils down to the kinds of problems we're trying to solve today. I mean, it's a pretty intense question, isn't it? For years, the standard approach was to create a massive, detailed plan up front. But this often led to projects that were slow, over budget, and frankly, didn't deliver what customers actually wanted. The reason? We were using the wrong approach for the type of problem we were facing. To really get this, we need to understand the difference between two kinds of problems. A complicated problem is like building a bridge. Yeah, it has tons of moving parts, but it's predictable. An expert can map it all out. But building a new software product, that's complex. You've got shifting user needs, changing technology, and countless unknowns. You can only really connect cause and effect looking backward. So trying to apply a rigid bridge building plan to a flexible software problem, it's just a recipe for disaster. So if the old way doesn't work for complex problems, what does? Well, this challenge gave rise to a whole new philosophy, a new mindset we call Agile. It's all about valuing people and our ability to adapt. The story is actually pretty cool. Back in 2001, 17 software developers, all fed up with the old, broken way of doing things, got together at a ski resort. They hammered out what became the Agile Manifesto. And it's important to remember, this wasn't some thick rule book. It was a philosophy, a collection of shared values for navigating uncertainty. And what they came up with is so simple, but so profound. They laid out 4 core values. Now look closely at the wording here. It says over. It doesn't mean things like plans and documentation are worthless. Not at all. It just means we value the things on the left more. We value people talking to each other, we value shipping software that actually works, we value working with our customers, and we value our ability to change course when we learn something new. Okay, so Agile is the big idea, the why. But how do you actually do it? That's where Scrum comes in. It's the most popular framework out there for bringing those Agile values to life. It's the how. Scrum is built on one core idea, empiricism. Now that sounds like a fancy academic word, but it's actually super simple. It just means that the best way to gain knowledge is through direct experience. You learn by doing. So instead of pretending we can predict the future with a perfect plan, Scrum says let's embrace the uncertainty and make decisions based on what we can actually see and prove. And this is where the magic really happens. Empiricism comes to life through 3 pillars that create this powerful, continuous feedback loop. First, transparency. Let's make everything visible so we're all on the same page. Second, inspection. Let's stop and check our progress often. And third, adaptation. Let's be willing to change our plan based on what we learn. This simple loop is what drives improvement. Okay, but a framework like this needs a guide, right? Someone to make sure the process works. And that brings us to one of the most important and honestly most misunderstood roles in all of Scrum, the Scrum Master. This quote from the Scrum Guide itself just hits the nail on the head. Notice the words it uses, true leaders who serve. They're not project managers. They're not bosses. They're servant leaders. Their main job is not to give orders, but to serve the team by empowering them and helping them be as effective as possible. So what does a Scrum Master actually do all day? Well, their mission is all about creating the perfect environment for their team to succeed. They're a coach, helping the team learn to manage itself. They're a problem solver, clearing roadblocks out of the team's way. And they're a facilitator, making sure meetings are productive, not just a waste of time. They basically act as a shield, protecting the team so they can focus on doing amazing work. All right, theory is great, but what does this all look like in the real world? Let's make this totally concrete. We're going to follow a fictional team. We'll call them Team Apera, as they go through their very first 2-week cycle, which in Scrum we call a sprint. You can think of the sprint as the heartbeat of Scrum. It's a short, consistent container for all the work. For Team Apera, this 2-week sprint is filled with a series of meetings or events that give their work a steady rhythm. And this rhythm is so important. It gives them a predictable pattern for tackling complexity and making real progress. So here's a quick look at the toolbox for their sprint. Every single event has a crystal clear purpose and a maximum time limit, a time box, which keeps everyone laser focused. You can see how each one is a chance to inspect something, the plan, the product, or the team's own process, and then adapt based on what was learned. So Team Upper's journey kicks off with sprint planning, and they're not just creating a to-do list here. The whole team gets together to answer 3 key questions. Why is this sprint valuable? What can we actually get done? And how are we going to do it? The big outcome is their sprint goal, one single objective that unites them and gives their work meaning for the next 2 weeks. Now, every single day, the developers on Team Apera get together for a daily scrum. It is a super quick 15-minute huddle, and let's be clear, this is not a status report for a manager. It's a planning meeting for the developers by the developers. It's their chance to sync up, see if they're still on track for their sprint goal, and adjust their plan for the next 24 hours. At the very end of their 2-week sprint, Team Apera holds a sprint review. Now, this is way more than just a demo. They show off the actual working piece of the product they built to their key stakeholders. The entire point is to get honest feedback. This is collaboration in its purest form, and it's where the team learns what their customers really value. And finally, after all that, comes maybe the most important event of all, the Sprint Retrospective. This is where Team Apera takes a breath and inspects itself. They ask 3 simple but incredibly powerful questions. By being honest about what went well and what didn't, they can commit to one small, concrete improvement for the next sprint. This ensures the team is always getting better. So, what's the big takeaway after Team Apera's first 2 weeks? Well, they didn't just deliver a piece of software. They delivered value, they learned a ton, and most importantly, they improved how they work together as a team. And this brings us full circle. Remember those complex problems we talked about at the start? Scrum gives us a way to deal with them. You can think of each sprint as this probe, sense, respond cycle. You probe the unknown by building something small. You sense how people react to it, and you respond by adapting your next move. This turns that scary unpredictability into your greatest advantage. At the end of the day, Scrum isn't really about meetings and roles. It's a framework that requires real courage. The courage to be open about challenges, the courage to inspect the hard truth, and the courage to adapt your plans. So the real question to leave you with is this: what big, tough, complex problem is your team ready to solve?